Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Sean Spicer, White House press secretary for Donald Trump, now the host of Spicer and Company on Newsmax every night, 6 p.m. Joins me. He's the author of this brand new book in my hand, Radical Nation, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris' Dangerous Plan for America. Sean, good to talk to you. Welcome back.
It's always good to be with you, Hugh. Thanks for having me back.
Sean, how do you find time to do a 5-night-a-week broadcast and write a book? 5 nights a week, Monday through Friday, for an hour is a lot of television.
You know, there's a lot of people that can ask me that question, but when I look at you and see your show and the columns that you write, I'm trying to keep up with you. Just so we're clear on that.
Luckily, I can wear, pajama bottoms in the studio. I don't have to go get made up and all that stuff. Sean, I want to go right to the end and to the agenda, a conservative action agenda. Donald Trump blurbed your book. So did Newt. So did Dan Bongino, wonderful guy, Charlie Kirk, Mercedes Schlapp, Dana Loesch. Everybody blurbed your book because they liked the agenda that you laid out for conservatives in an opposition. Do you think that agenda will help Glenn Youngkin across the river? I think you're a Virginian. I'm a Virginian. I think Youngkin's going to win. What do you think?
I think right now he's going to win. The momentum's on his side. Look, we've seen the last several cycles of Virginia politics come down to 5 points or less for a lot of these statewide races. Youngkin's got the momentum going in. Terry McAuliffe has a base problem. Look at the people who are coming into Virginia and the places that they're going. They know that they have a problem with the base that got Biden elected in Virginia by a huge margin, and you've got a guy that was frankly a former popular governor struggling in the Northern Virginia area with minorities, with people who have traditionally voted Democrat. I mean, so the ads are starting to look like that the squad, AOC and her ilk wrote them for him because they know that there's a huge enthusiasm. So yeah, I think Youngkin's going to go over the finish line. I think that we're going to take back the House of Delegates in Virginia by a couple seats, and I really think that the under ticket, Winsome Sears for Lieutenant Governor and Jason Miyares for Lieutenant Governor, are both going to come over the line too.
Now, Sean Spicer, number 9 in your conservative action agenda, protect your children from radical indoctrination. Now, you wrote this. I imagine you had to go to press. You had to submit the manuscript in April or May, and you had no idea how Youngkin would get the nomination, which was by seizing on education, the end of merit and accelerated classes, and then win and put himself in a position to win by virtue of focusing on quarantine, COVID shutdown, masks, and especially CRT. But here you are, you're anticipating on page 271 of Radical Nation, which my audience can see if they're watching on YouTube. Have you got this propped up, by the way, on the set of Spicer and Company?
I'm working on it every night. Yeah, we make sure we plug appropriately.
Okay, because Admiral Stavridis comes on and he never doesn't have in the back of his screenshot for my YouTube and Facebook. He's always got 2034 up there, and I haven't seen yet whether Radical Nation is now on Newsmax 24/7.
Oh, we've done a good job. It's probably 23/7, but we're trying to get into that final hour.
Okay,
but I'll tell you the point that you're making, though. I will say, look, when you write a book, and you know this, that you don't know what the environment's going to look like when it publishes, because it takes months after you finish it. And I couldn't have been luckier in terms of what's happening now in terms of CRT and the other issues that I was talking about when I wrote this book, and them coming to fruition, them becoming to the forefront. I mean, obviously in Virginia, this is a big deal, but frankly, it's a big deal throughout the country right now, and people are realizing what's happening. You have people like President Obama dismissing them as conservative, follies, when in fact it's a real issue for every parent around the country.
When we come back, we're going to do the podcast today with Sean. At the end of the show, he's going to stick around. I'm going to do the podcast, the interview with Hugh Hewitt, and go deep into Radical Nation, the brand new book. But I got to ask, in terms of I want the radio audience to hear your assessment of Jen Psaki. I've read it. There are 2 chapters on the new media landscape, and Jen Psaki's in both of them. She's loved by the left. What do you think of her professional approach, Sean?
Here's the thing. I think she does fine. My issue is always with the press corps. I think these guys let her off every day of the week. They were former colleagues of hers when she was at CNN. They're buddies. This is not. There's no pushback. There's no reconciling the double standards, the hypocrisy, the failed policies. So, she gets out there. I think it's cute every day, the way that she sort of throws back questions at Peter Doocy or whoever and tries to make it funny. But it's really pathetic the way that the rest of the press corps sits there and just laughs it up.
So let me ask you, Sean, if President Trump had said in a town hall, "We will defend China," In other words, on a impulse, doing away with strategic ambiguity, which I think should be done away with, but not on an impulse, and then walked it back. How would your week have been as press secretary?
Well, first of all, I don't know how I would have made it out of the day. There are so many things that happened at CNN town hall, and they dismissed them all. Like, that's the thing. It's like batting balls away. They were like, oh, he just misspoke. He was tired. He was up past 9. I don't understand how he can make so many mistakes and be so unclear as to U.S. policy. I mean, this guy was vice president for 8 years, chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, and he doesn't know U.S. policy with respect to Taiwan. I mean, what? And by the way, you're going to screw up that. You don't send your press secretary out the next day to do a little mop up. You make sure that you do something about it, because the Chinese certainly want to make sure that it's not just the press secretary that's cleaning up. The president believes it.
I'm going to be back with Sean Spicer on the podcast interview with Hugh Hewitt. Go out and get Radical Nation. It's available at Amazon.com. It's a primer on everything that's going down at 1600, as you would expect from the host of Spicer and Company, former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Stay tuned, America, to this station. Make sure you get my podcast interview with Hugh Hewitt for an in-depth conversation with Sean Spicer. Sean, would you lay out for people who may have been abroad when you started at Newsmax and what Spicer and Company does at 6 p.m. every night, and why you wrote Radical Nation right now?
Use the full 8 minutes then. So Spicer and Company launched at Newsmax March 3rd of 2020, which is Super Tuesday. We've now been on just over, 18, 19 months. The trajectory has been amazing. The number of people who have found the show every night at 6 o'clock. And the thing that's interesting to you is, so every night, we get to sit down with the people of the day, and talk about the issues that are driving news, the things that people are sitting around at dinner every night and talking about. And the thing that I think is fun is that, a lot of television hosts, are frankly pundits. They get up there, they give their opinion, whatever. The thing that I think is unique about my show is that as a host, I've been in the arena. I was a White House press secretary. I was on the Hill, worked for more than 10 members of Congress, 23 years in the military, assistant U.S. trade representative for 3 years. So when I talk about things on the show, it's not just sort of asking a guest. I can say, look, my experience is X. Do you agree? Do you disagree? Or is there anything different about how the sausage is getting made this time? And I think that brings something really unique in terms of insight into what's going on in Washington, how decisions are getting made, who the players are. And we get to have that conversation every night with the key folks that are driving those decisions. With respect to Radical Nation, I mean, look, this was, to me, the first comprehensive look at the Biden-Harris administration. The people that are in it, frankly, the lack of qualifications for so many of them, they're very nice people from what I can gather, but most of them are not qualified for the jobs they're in. And then also the policies that are being pursued. And as I like to say here, the big why. Why are they all doing it? Because they tie together. And everything that is going on in this administration, when you sit back and look at it and lay it on the book, is in pursuit of greater political power. They want D.C. to become a state so that they get 2 additional senators. They want to let more people over the southern border because they want more voters. They want to pack the court because they want to cement a judicial legacy. I mean, so there's all of these things. They want to pass trillions of dollars in new spending to get more people hooked on government. But all of this is in pursuit of greater political power.
Now, I want people to know the reason I trust Sean is his coaching tree is amazing. My son is on it. He's now up on the Hill working for Michael Waltz. I always disclose that. He worked for Sean years ago. And there are so many people around Washington, D.C. who worked for Sean in that long career. You've got a network out there that pulses signals to you every day for Newsmax. I mean, it's really kind of incredible. Is that why they put you on prime time, because of the Sean coaching tree? It's like Bill Belichick looking for some advice from people.
Well, I appreciate the kind words, and your son was one of my superstars and has done very well on his own. But that is right. I mean, I sit there every day, and I'm talking to folks that have worked with, worked for, and that work for me, and saying, okay, here's the read that I have on the situation. Do you agree with this? Is your boss doing something different? Where is this thing headed? And again, I think that presents a unique insight every day, because there are so many times when people look at what's going on in Washington and, frankly, I think have an incorrect read because they don't understand the dynamics of the different personalities. Not everything is logically driven in Washington, believe it or not. Most of the time it's people's egos that get in the way, and understanding the fragility of somebody's ego getting bent out of shape and what they will do to destroy something because they didn't get the due that they thought they were worth is something that from the outside people don't necessarily get.
I think it's the insight that powers everything, but especially chapters 17 and 18 on the American media disgrace, which is part one and part two. And that's really what I wanted to drill in with you on. I've been around media for 31 years on radio and television and print, and now on podcast and via cable carrier and the Salem News Channel. I'm astonished, Sean, at the disintegration of media credibility. There was a time when you could not get anyone to believe that media was biased, and the Media Research Center, which you praise highly in Radical Nation, was alone out there. Brent Bazell, they were just alone in the wilderness, and no one believed them. Now it's a given, and you really explore it in these two chapters. The blinders are off. Everybody understands. Everyone is a partisan.
Well, yeah, and the thing that I think I really try to drive home is that it's what you don't see. If you wake up and you listen to the Today Show or read the Washington Post or the New York Times, you are not getting a good chunk of what's going on in this country right now. And that's the biggest sin of all, because right now the White House press corps refuses to push back. They refuse to acknowledge the hypocrisy, the double standards, the failures of policy, and why those failures are occurring. The other day you saw Joe Biden go out and start talking about we got to get port workers to come going 24/7. 24/7, you can't get people to work an 8-hour shift, and you think the answer is telling them to work 24/7? I mean, there are fundamental problems with their policies, and we have inflation going off the roof, and their answer is to spend $3 trillion. You've got a Secretary of Transportation, Pete Buttigieg, who I'm sure is a very nice guy, but he's 38 years old, and he's the mayor of a city with 66 buses. You really wonder why we have a problem, a supply chain problem, why our ports are backed up. And the media doesn't want to discuss anything negative that happens. Hugh, I'm going to tell you something that didn't make the book, but it exemplifies the two chapters that you just did. It's going back about 2.5 weeks now. The first repatriation ceremony in the history of our country occurred at Joint Base Pearl Harbor. The U.S. Repatriated 38 Korean soldiers, and the Koreans repatriated 6 of our soldiers. President Moon from Korea flew over to Hawaii to personally deliver the remains of 6 U.S. service members. Do you know who greeted them from the Biden administration?
It was a member of the military, wasn't it?
Yes.
Was it?
Not one member of the administration. Not one. It was the 4-star admiral who heads PAC fleet down there, but no one from the administration, not the deputy undersecretary for PowerPoint. I mean, I'm sure going to Hawaii in the fall is a tough stretch for anybody, but it is an absolute embarrassment that no one greeted the president of Korea from our country, from the civilian side, from the Biden administration, and also, frankly, recognize the remains being brought home. It's a disgrace. And no one from the U.S. media except Newsmax covered it. No one from the Washington Post asked a question. There were pictures in Korean media only.
And the idea that a head of state who is on the front line with the Chinese Communist Party does not receive a ally's welcome. And an ally's welcome is G7 sort of stuff. South Korea is a big economic player as well as a big foreign policy and national security player. I'm glad you called attention to it. Sean, let me even up you. Radical Nation's got a lot that people can rely on for many years. It did not cover, obviously. It went to press, the Afghanistan collapse. Nobody is covering, you know how Fridays work. In fact, I'm going to have you explain the Friday news dump, will you? Because on Friday, Ned Price walks up to the microphone and says, we have 363 American citizens in Kabul. Sorry, bye, and goes away. And nobody knows. We got 363 AMSITs. That's not the LPRs. That's not the translators who ought to have been brought into the country. 363 American citizens. They've been saying around 100 for a month and a half, and we've got more than 100 out since then. And it's not being covered because of the Friday news avalanche. Would you explain to people how that works?
Yeah, I mean, obviously reporters, like anyone else, want to go home on a Friday. So what do? At 5, 6 o'clock on Friday, you dump all the news that's bad so that you know, even if it gets covered, it's going to go into a Saturday morning news cycle when people are enjoying their weekend or taking their kids to soccer or baseball or whatever they do. And so you get the bad news out. So by Monday, quote unquote, it's old news. No one's going to pick it up by then. And so it's gotten out. It lives its life, but it dies quick. And then you move on. So if you got bad news, generally you want to wait till 5, 6 o'clock on a Friday, get it out there, know that it's going to be sparsely, if ever, covered on Saturday or Sunday. And then, by Monday, it's a brand new day.
Sean, you weren't even born when I was working for Richard Nixon at the elbow of America, San Clemente, in 1978 and 1979 when the Iranian hostage crisis came down. There were no pictures then of the 53 Americans held hostage. There are no pictures now of the 175 minimum of the 363 American citizens who want to get out. Ned Price confirmed that. But I can't believe the disgrace of the American media. They are not covering this. Very few people talk to John Andrazik, whose song "Blood on Our Hands" ought to be everywhere. I know you've covered these hostages. Where is the American media? It's 363 Americans.
Yeah, and remember, Jen Psaki stood there at the White House podium, chiding any reporter, saying we didn't strand any Americans. And then to your point, Ned Price is out there saying, yeah, we think we got about 300 change, 176 that want to go. I mean, and I mean, not only are we not getting covered who's still there, one, two, they're not doing anything about it. It is being done. All of the legwork is being done by private groups, by individuals, former military officials, NGOs. I mean, where is the State Department? Where is the government in this process? It is a complete disgrace, and yet, there is zero coverage. Because part of the problem is they don't want to write anything bad. They don't want to take the time to understand what's going on. And once Jen told them, hey, no one was stranded, they were like, okay, move on. And that's the point. That's, what those chapters cover is if Jen Psaki tells them, don't look over here, they don't look over there. They'd rather write puff pieces about Jen in the New York Times and style section things, but they're not going to cover the hypocrisy, the failures of this administration, and the reality of the political struggles they have. I guarantee you, when Terry McAuliffe loses this race, somehow it's going to be Donald Trump's fault that Biden didn't do more or something. I mean, it's unbelievable how they blame everybody else for everything except for Biden and his failed policies.
Now, I've got some friends, as you do, in the White House press corps. Michael Shear comes on this show all the time. I respect Michael a great deal. It doesn't mean that the White House press corps is functioning, that they have good reporters among them. The White House press corps has to function sort of in a relay race, doesn't it? It has to press hard against a press secretary in tandem or in quartet or in quintet in order to push something. There has to be an orchestra of news if you're going to hear the melody. And that happened to you. It happens to every press secretary. It's not happening to Jen Psaki. I told Dwayne, I don't want her audio. It's boring. Only Peter Doocy is the only one. She's figured out I can discredit Peter Doocy if I go to him and laugh at him. That didn't work for you, but it's working for her.
But the whole thing is first of all, I will say this. Peter Doocy asks respectful civil questions, right? So
yes, he does.
Up and down like a hyena, like Jim Acosta and some of the other guys. So it's always civil and respectful. That was something that never occurred. The decorum or lack thereof and professionalism just didn't occur during the Trump White House. But she knows that she can throw a quip out, and frankly, that everyone else will go hee, laugh at it, and move on. But the funny thing is, when I watch those exchanges, she sort of throws a question back. He says, the other day it was, hey, Jen, after pushing these mask mandates, he walks out to dinner without a mask, and Mrs. Biden, she goes, oh, come on, Peter. Ha, 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 ha. Same excuse she gave on Inauguration Day when he went maskless at the Lincoln Memorial after signing an executive order talking about everyone had to wear something on federal buildings. It's dismissive, and the folks on the left think it's funny because she makes a joke of it and sort of brushes her hand at Peter. The reality is that anyone else, if this had been Trump, they'd be calling out the hypocrisy, the double standards, the failure to abide by his own mandates, blah, 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 blah. But she realizes it works, and she's just going to keep doing it because she gets it. I don't fault her for that. I mean, for the fact that she realizes if I just swat him away and make a hand gesture and go he, all the other folks in the press corps will laugh, and a bunch of people on Twitter will call it a Psaki bomb.
But the Psaki bomb doesn't work if half the country thinks it's a nightmare. She is doing Peter Doocy the career turn of her life, right? Jen Psaki ought to get a percentage of Peter Doocy's next contract because Peter Doocy is going to be an anchor at Fox forever because of Jen Psaki, credentialing him, building him up on the eyes of the 75 million Americans who voted for Donald Trump in 2020. Peter Doocy has become their voice in the newsroom, and they know he is.
But Hugh, I agree with you wholeheartedly. But you realize that there's a lot more people in that press room. So when I was press secretary, one of the things that I made very clear was I called on everybody, left, right, foreign press, Hispanic press, urban radio, business media. I mean, my point was, to your thing, I wanted to diversify the room so that the front row, the New York Times, the Washington Post, the ABCs, didn't inoculate everybody else with the narrative about Russia every day, right? So my thought was if you bring in other voices, it's going to be good. What Jen does is she calls on all of the mainstream media, throws the obligatory question to Peter and calls it a day. There's no calling to Newsmax. There's no calling to CNBC. Talk to the reporters that aren't part of the New York Times or the wire services, and they don't get questioned, right? So there's a lot of other reporters in that room, but her strategy, and again, I give her credit for the fact that you minimize your interactions and you control the narrative more, is that she feels like, I'm just going to call on the wire services, the Washington Post of the world, and then throw the obligatory question to Peter to check a box, and then end the briefing. And it works. And
It works. It's amazing.
Because the problem is, as long as you feed the mainstream media beast, they're not going to complain. So the other voices out there, the media, the business media, the urban radios, the Hispanic media, their voice isn't going to get out. They're squawking, and who do you think's going to write that story up? Not the Washington Post or ABC or CBS or Politico, because as long as they're getting fed, they're fine. And that's the thing that's happening. When I was doing it, and they were pissed because they weren't dominating the press briefing room, then they were questions about the stories about how too many other voices were getting into the briefing room.
Yeah, the perfect example of this is John Gizzi. And John may be the smartest guy in D.C. He got an elephant memory. He's like Novak used to be. He knows everybody and everything about everyone. And I don't think she's called on Gizzi that I've seen. And I don't really, I don't think it's working. This is what I want to go to your premise. This is what she does. It's his approval's down to 43, Sean. It works until it doesn't. It's a thin blue political line that she's breaking through. The floor is falling out beneath them. And I don't think there's any way Jen Psaki can substitute for an absent president. Do you?
Well, that's the point. You just put it there. At some point, the press secretary can't make stuff up. I mean, if there's no policy, if there's no plan, you can only tap dance for so long. But at the end of the day, you still have a complicit press. To your point, though, where I think the poll numbers are thinking is that the American people see through it. And they go, wait a second. You're talking about ports operating 24/7 when we can't get people to work 8 hours. We're talking about passing $3.5 trillion of additional, quote unquote, non-infrastructure spending, and you can't tell us what's in the bill or why we need to pass it. Inflation's on the rise. Shelves are empty. Ports are backed up. I got to order for Christmas before Labor Day. I mean, so there's only so much dancing you can do if you're Jen, because at some point the American people, whether it's walking through a grocery store, filling up the car, they get it. And so she can't make stuff up out of thin air. I mean, she's tried, by claiming that no one was stranded, by, claiming that doing cleanup. But that's all she can possibly do. At some point, the lack of accomplishment, the lack of plans, the lack of policies comes through.
So, Sean Spicer, to wrap up, Radical Nation, and I appreciate the amount of time you've given me this morning. Thank you. This is the agenda for 2022 candidates in Radical Nation. Is it going to be the agenda for President Trump running again? What do you think?
Well, if he runs again, I mean, honestly, I think President Trump, most of what's in the book is based on the fact that, look, here's what Trump did, and here's how Biden's screwing it up. So I think President Trump knows his true north, knows what he needs to do in terms of cutting taxes, standing up for life, re-engaging on the world stage to make sure that we put America first. He knows what his agenda is, and I think it's just going to be basically a continuation of what he did the first time. And frankly, then getting us back on course, especially when you think about our southern border. I mean, my goodness, the idea that you're undoing everything just to spite Trump, and i.e. letting people in. But Hugh, let me make one quick point to your audience that I think conservatives make a mistake, and I point this out in the book. Kamala Harris is, when conservatives say she's not doing her job, that's a mistake. She is doing her job. They want to pretend that they care about the border. They don't. They want people to come in this country. Look at the Afghans. They come over within days. We're talking about giving them citizenship and DACA for those folks. And we're not talking about the SIVs. All these other folks, they don't care. They look at these folks coming over the southern border as future Democratic voters. So it's not a question of doing her job or not. They recognize the potential of these folks. And so they're not really in earnest trying to solve a lot of these problems. Donald Trump gets it. If he were president again, in 5 seconds, he would reinstitute construction on the wall, remain in Mexico, Title 42, all of the things that stemmed, and not just stemmed it, but frankly sent a signal. If you don't think you're going to get in, you don't go, whether that's the border or to a restaurant. I mean, if you call ahead and they say, hey, we're booked ahead, we've got no reservations, and there's a line of 50 people outside, you go, all right, I'm not going to go stand there. That's silly. I'm never going to get in. Well, if you tell people they're never going to get in the country because you've got all of these issues that you're now going to construct, whether it's policy-wise or physical in the sense of a wall, they're not going to show up.
Now, Sean, I disagree with you on replacement theory, I think. I don't believe that. I do believe in optics theory. They'll do anything at the White House to avoid a bad picture. They'll do anything not to have children in cages. They'll do any, including opening the border, busing and flying people away so that they cannot be seen by the news media under the bridge as the Haitians were. I don't believe in replacement theory. I believe in optics theory. My question
Okay, but
is,
let me just ask this though. Here's my point. If you don't believe that that's the case, and I've talked about this with a lot of folks, then explain to me, because I agree with you on the cages part. I get that they do want to avoid any image that they're doing anything that was associated with what Trump got blamed for, rightly or wrongly. But the reality is, it's common sense on how to stop this problem. And right now, when every media organization interviews people at the border and said, would you have come under Trump? They say no.
no, you're right.
Are
You're
you
right.
coming because of Biden? Yes. So my question is, if you're the Biden administration and you hear that, then it's a fairly easy fix. And it doesn't take much to say, I'm doing everything we can to shut it off. You're going to remain in Mexico. We'll proceed with your asylum, hearing in Mexico or in another country, blah, blah, blah. Once people know that they can't get in, they'll stop. They get it.
Because
right?
of two reasons, Sean. There are only two signals that work to the mass of the world: building the wall and the Remain in Mexico policy. The Biden administration reinstated Remain in Mexico, and they're getting scorched by the left. Scorched. They're going to have.
They didn't reinstitute it. The court told them they had to do it. So,
Right.
So they did it kicking and screaming. But my point is that if you don't believe that they see a political benefit to this, then they could easily do things that would stop it. But they choose
They're left wing.
not to.
They're left wing. AOC would. They cannot lose 5 votes in the House. It's, to me, the radicals in the House caucus and the Senate are driving the bus that Joe Biden is not driving. He's in the driver's seat, but it's AI because it ain't Joe Biden. Radical Nation by Sean Spicer, available in bookstores now. Sean, good to talk to you, my friend. I hope you do well and keep working hard. Be well.
Thank you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.